What happens when a black woman, humiliated in front of an entire gym, reveals a shocking connection to the very corporate structure that empowers her to fight back? How will the confrontation unfold when the tables are turned on the gym manager? Before we dive into this gripping story of injustice and power dynamics, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. Ma'am, can I speak to you for a moment? Renee Parker looked up from her phone, her earbuds still playing the faint echoes of her favorite workout playlist. The gym floor bustled with energy, weights clanging, treadmills humming, and trainers barking orders. She had just completed her warm-up, ready to tackle the grueling circuit she had planned, when the voice cut through her thoughts. It was firm, clipped, and undeniably directed at her. Renee pulled out one earbud and turned to face the source of the interruption. Standing a few feet away was Ethan Barnes, the gym manager. His clean-cut appearance and tailored polo screamed professionalism, but the furrow in his brow and the way he held his clipboard hinted at something else entirely. "Yes?" she replied, keeping her voice neutral but inquisitive. Ethan stepped closer, his eyes darting briefly to the group of weightlifters nearby who had paused to watch the exchange. "Do you have your membership card on you?" he asked, his tone flat but carrying an edge of suspicion. Renee frowned. She wasn't new here, far from it. For 6 months she had been coming to this gym almost daily, to the point where she recognized most of the staff by name. She had never been asked for her membership card during a workout before. "I checked in at the front desk, just like I always do," she said calmly, gesturing toward the entrance. "Why do you need to see my card?" Ethan shifted his weight and gave her a tight-lipped smile that didn't reach his eyes. "It's just a routine check, ma'am. We need to ensure that all members in the facility are authorized to be here." "Routine?" Renee repeated, raising an eyebrow. She glanced around. No one else on the gym floor seemed to be digging through their belongings for a card. The weightlifters had returned to their sets, but a couple of women on the treadmills were now eyeing her curiously. "Yes. Routine," Ethan said, his smile now almost condescending. "Your card, please." Renee took a deep breath, suppressing the irritation bubbling inside her. She knew this wasn't about a routine check. She had seen Ethan pass by several other gym-goers without so much as a glance. "I'm not carrying my card," she said, keeping her tone steady. "But like I said, I checked in at the desk. If there's an issue, I'm sure they can confirm that." Ethan's face hardened. "Without your card, I can't verify that you belong here. Are you sure you're a member?" The question hung in the air, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Renee felt the heat of embarrassment creep up her neck. She knew what this was. She had seen this type of behavior before, a quiet, insidious questioning of her right to exist in certain spaces. She had fought her way through this type of treatment her entire life, from the classrooms of her predominantly white high school to the boardrooms of her marketing firm, and now apparently she had to fight it in her sanctuary too. "Mr. Barnes," Renee said, her voice colder now. "You can check with the front desk or your system. I don't appreciate being singled out like this." "It's not about singling anyone out," Ethan countered, though his defensive tone said otherwise. "We have policies to maintain the integrity of this gym. This is an exclusive establishment, and we have to be cautious about unauthorized exclusive establishment. Unauthorized use." The words hit Renee like a slap. She glanced down at her Nike tank top and high-end leggings, her neatly styled braids pulled back into a ponytail. She wasn't sure what about her appearance screamed unauthorized, but she had a sinking feeling that Ethan's definition had less to do with gym policies and more to do with her skin color. "Fine," Renee said, keeping her voice level even as anger churned in her chest. "Let's go to the front desk and sort this out." Ethan blinked, as if surprised by her composure, but quickly recovered. "Of course. Follow me." The walk to the front desk was silent, though Renee could feel the stares of other members as she passed. Some were curious, others sympathetic, but none intervened. At the desk, a young receptionist named Sarah looked up, her friendly expression faltering when she saw Ethan and Renee approach. "Hi, Sarah." Renee said, forcing a polite smile. "Can you please confirm for Mr. Barnes that I checked in this morning?" Sarah glanced nervously between Renee and Ethan before typing into her computer. After a few seconds, she looked up. "Yes, Ms. Parker checked in at 7:15 a.m. Her membership is active." Renee turned to Ethan, folding her arms across her chest. "There you have it. Anything else you'd like to check?" Ethan hesitated, his face reddening slightly. "Thank you, Sarah," he said stiffly before turning back to Renee. "Apologies for the misunderstanding. We just have to ensure—" "Save it," Renee interrupted, her patience finally snapping. "We both know what this was about. I'd appreciate it if you kept your routine checks consistent across all members next time." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Ethan standing awkwardly by the desk. Her workout was ruined, but she wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing her upset. She grabbed her bag from the locker room and left the gym, her mind already racing with what she would do next. That evening, Renee sat at her kitchen table, a steaming cup of chamomile tea in front of her. Her laptop screen glowed as she typed furiously, detailing the encounter in an email to the gym's corporate office. She wasn't one to let things slide, not anymore. This wasn't just about her, it was about every person who had ever been made to feel unwelcome in a space where they belonged. The email was clear, concise, and firm, ending with a request for a formal meeting with the gym's management. She hit send and leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. She thought about her journey, how hard she had worked to climb the corporate ladder, breaking barriers and shattering stereotypes along the way. She wasn't going to let someone like Ethan Barnes make her feel small. Her phone buzzed. It was a notification from LinkedIn. Curious, she opened it and smiled at the name on the connection request, William Harper, Regional Manager, Fit Elite Gyms. She had worked with him briefly during a marketing campaign a few years ago. Maybe this meeting would go differently than Ethan expected. The next morning, Renee arrived at the Fit Elite corporate headquarters with a sense of purpose. The building's sleek glass facade reflected the early sunlight, standing as a symbol of success and ambition. She straightened her blazer, smoothed her braids, and stepped inside. The lobby was bustling with activity, a mix of gym executives and fitness influencers, sipping green juices and discussing marketing strategies. None of them paid her any mind, which was just how she wanted it. For now. As she approached the receptionist, Renee's mind replayed the events of the previous day. Ethan's smug expression, his condescending tone, the implied message that she didn't belong. She shook her head, reminding herself why she was here. This wasn't just personal, it was a chance to address a systemic problem. "I'm here for the 10 a.m. meeting with Mr. Harper," she said, her voice calm and professional. The receptionist typed her name into the system and nodded. "Of course, Miss Parker. Please take the elevator to the 15th floor. Mr. Harper's assistant will meet you there." Renee stepped into the elevator, her reflection staring back at her in the mirrored walls. She squared her shoulders. This wasn't her first high-stakes meeting, and she wouldn't let it rattle her. As the elevator doors opened, a young woman greeted her with a bright smile and led her to a spacious conference room. Inside, a long table was set with neatly organized folders and water bottles. At the head of the table sat William Harper, the regional manager she had briefly worked with in the past. His silver hair and confident demeanor exuded authority, but his warm smile as he stood to greet her put her at ease. "Renee Parker," he said, extending a hand. "It's been a while. Thank you for coming." "Thank you for inviting me," Renee replied, shaking his hand. "I appreciate the opportunity to address this matter." Before they could continue, the door opened again, and in walked Ethan Barnes. He froze for a moment when he saw Renee, his confident stride faltering as confusion flickered across his face. Renee met his gaze steadily, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing any reaction. "Mr. Barnes," Harper said, gesturing for him to take a seat. "You're familiar with Ms. Parker, I believe?" Ethan nodded, his expression tight. "Yes, we've met." Harper's smile didn't waver, but his tone shifted slightly, carrying a weight of authority. Good. Let's get started. As the meeting began, Harper outlined the agenda. Reviewing the complaint filed by Renee, assessing the actions of the gym staff, and determining steps to address the situation. Ethan's posture grew increasingly rigid as Harper spoke, while Renee maintained her calm demeanor, though her heart was racing beneath the surface. Ms. Parker, would you mind recounting the events from your perspective? Harper asked, turning to her with an encouraging nod. Renee took a deep breath and began. She described her experience at the gym in detail, from Ethan's initial confrontation to the awkward interaction at the front desk. She kept her tone measured, focusing on the facts, though she allowed a hint of emotion to underscore the humiliation she had felt. "I've been a member of Fit Elite for 6 months," she concluded. "In that time, I've never been asked to present my membership card during a workout, nor have I seen anyone else subjected to such scrutiny. It's clear that I was targeted, and I believe it's important for the company to address why that happened." Harper nodded thoughtfully, his fingers steepled under his chin. "Thank you, Ms. Parker. I appreciate your professionalism in bringing this to our attention." He turned to Ethan, who had been staring at his clipboard as though it held the secrets to the universe. "Mr. Barnes, do you have anything to add?" Ethan cleared his throat, finally looking up. "I was simply following protocol," he said, his tone defensive. "We've had issues with unauthorized access in the past, and I was acting in the best interest of the gym." Renee raised an eyebrow but stayed silent, letting Harper handle the response. "Mr. Barnes," Harper said, his tone cool, "I reviewed the security reports from your gym. There have been no recent incidents of unauthorized access. Can you explain why Ms. Parker was singled out?" Ethan faltered, his face reddening. I can't speak to that specifically, but I assure you, my actions were not discriminatory." Harper's expression remained neutral, but the room's tension was palpable. "Yet the perception of bias is just as damaging as the act itself," he said, "and in this case the perception is strong enough to warrant this meeting." Renee decided it was time to speak up. "Mr. Barnes," she said, her voice steady, "I'm curious. How do you decide when to conduct these routine checks? Is it based on a specific policy, or is it left to your discretion?" Ethan hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. It's discretionary," he admitted reluctantly. "I see," Renee said, leaning back in her chair. "So it's possible for personal biases to influence those decisions?" Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but seemed to think better of it, his silence speaking volumes. The turning point came when Harper addressed Renee directly. "Ms. Parker, as you know, Fit Elite takes matters of discrimination very seriously. Your concerns have highlighted an important issue, and I'd like to discuss potential solutions with you." Ethan looked startled, his eyes darting between Harper and Renee. He seemed to realize, perhaps for the first time, that this wasn't just a routine complaint. It was something much bigger. Renee smiled faintly. "Thank you, Mr. Harper. I'd be happy to provide input on how the company can create a more inclusive environment." Harper nodded. "Excellent. We've already taken the liberty of drafting some initial steps, but your expertise would be invaluable in shaping them." The word expertise seemed to hit Ethan like a brick. He frowned, clearly confused. "Wait," he said, his voice unsteady. "Expertise? I'm sorry, but who exactly is Ms. Parker?" Renee turned to him, her smile widening. "I'm glad you asked," she said smoothly. "In addition to being a loyal member of Fit Elite, I'm a senior marketing strategist for one of the top firms in the city. My company also happens to be a significant stakeholder in the Fit Elite brand." Ethan's jaw dropped. Harper, however, looked entirely unsurprised, as if he had been waiting for this moment. You work for the company that owns us?" Ethan stammered. "That's correct," Renee said, her tone calm but firm. "And I take both my role as a professional and my role as a member very seriously. When I invest my time and money into something, I expect it to meet the highest standards. including how members are treated. Ethan slumped back in his chair, his face pale. He seemed to realize that this wasn't just about a gym membership. It was about his job, his reputation, and possibly his future. Harper allowed the silence to linger for a moment before speaking. "Mr. Barnes, I trust you understand the gravity of this situation. Ms. Parker has graciously offered to assist us in addressing these concerns, but we'll also need to evaluate your leadership moving forward." Ethan nodded mutely, his bravado completely gone. As the meeting concluded, Harper thanked Renee for her input and promised swift action. Ethan left the room without meeting her gaze, and Renee watched him go with a mix of satisfaction and pity. She hadn't come here to ruin anyone's career, but she also wasn't going to let people like him go. Renee lingered for a moment after Harper excused himself, gazing out the conference room's floor-to-ceiling windows. The city stretched out before her, a reminder of how far she had come, and how far she still had to go. As Renee walked out of the conference room, she carried a renewed sense of resolve. The weight of the morning's event still lingered, but so did the satisfaction of knowing she had made an impact. The ride down the elevator was quiet, her reflection staring back at her once again in the mirrored walls. But this time, there was no second-guessing or self-doubt. She had stood up for herself and countless others who had endured similar treatment, and that was something no one could take away. When the elevator doors opened to the bustling lobby, Renee's phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from William Harper. Subject: immediate follow-up. Dear Ms. Parker, thank you for your invaluable insight during today's meeting. We have already begun implementing a plan to address the concerns you raised. As a first step, we are instituting mandatory bias training for all managerial staff, beginning with Mr. Barnes. Additionally, we are revising our membership verification policies to ensure fairness and consistency across all locations. And we'd also like to formally invite you to join our Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Board. Your expertise and perspective would be an incredible asset to our ongoing efforts to foster a more inclusive environment at Fit Elite. On the 21st of March, Vice President Joe Biden voted to create Warm Regards. William Harper, Regional Manager, Fit Elite Gyms. Renee couldn't help but smile. The invitation to the advisory board was unexpected, but it aligned perfectly with her commitment to creating meaningful change. She replied quickly, thanking Harper and agreeing to join the board. Then, slipping her phone into her bag, she walked out of the building and into the crisp afternoon air. Later that afternoon, as Renee settled into her home office to catch up on work, her doorbell rang. Frowning, she glanced at her watch. She wasn't expecting anyone. Rising from her desk, she walked to the door and opened it. Standing on her porch was Ethan Barnes. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Ethan looked far less confident than he had at the gym. His shoulders were slouched, his face pale, and his hands nervously clutched the strap of his messenger bag. Renee crossed her arms and leaned against the doorframe, her expression neutral. "Miss Parker," he began, his voice hesitant. I wanted to apologize. In person." Renee raised an eyebrow. "You've already apologized," she said. "At the meeting." "I know," Ethan said quickly. "But it wasn't enough. I need you to understand that I never intended to make you feel unwelcome. I was just..." "Just what?" Renee interrupted, her tone sharp. "Doing your job? Following protocol? We both know that's not the full story." Ethan winced, nodding. "You're right," he admitted. "I was wrong. I let my assumptions cloud my judgment and I humiliated you because of it. I'm deeply sorry." Renee studied him for a moment, searching for any hint of insincerity. What she saw instead was a man genuinely grappling with his own biases. She could see the discomfort in his posture, the effort it took for him to show up at her door. For the first time, he looked human. "I appreciate you saying that," Renee said finally. "But words alone don't fix what happened. What are you going to do to ensure this doesn't happen again?" Ethan straightened slightly as if he'd been expecting the question. "I've already signed up for the bias training Mr. Harper mentioned," he said. "And I've requested a transfer to a different location. I think a fresh start will help me see things differently, with more empathy." Renee nodded slowly. "That's a start," she said. "But remember, this isn't just about you. It's about the culture you contribute to, the example you set for your team. Change isn't easy, but it's necessary." Ethan nodded, his expression earnest. "Thank you," he said, "for holding me accountable and for giving me a chance to do better." Renee watched him walk back to his car, a small sense of hope stirring in her chest. People could change. It wasn't always easy and it didn't always happen, but it was possible, and that, she realized, was worth fighting for. That evening, Renee sat on her living room couch, scrolling through social media. Her inbox was flooded with messages of support after she'd shared a brief post about her experience at the gym. Friends, colleagues, and even strangers had reached out, thanking her for speaking up and sharing their own stories of discrimination and exclusion. As she read through the messages, one in particular caught her eye. It was from a young woman named Mia, who described feeling unwelcome at her local gym due to similar encounters. Mia wrote about how she had considered giving up her membership, but was inspired by Renee's story to stay and advocate for herself. Renee set her phone down, her mind racing. This wasn't just about one gym, one manager, or even one company. It was about creating spaces where everyone felt valued and respected, regardless of their background. She realized she had an opportunity and a responsibility to do more. Picking up her laptop, she began drafting a proposal for a new campaign. The idea was simple yet powerful: fitness for all. The campaign would highlight the stories of diverse gym members, showcase their journeys, and emphasize the importance of inclusion in the fitness industry. It would be more than just a marketing strategy, it would be a movement. 3 months later, Renee stood in front of a packed audience at FitElite's annual Leadership Summit. She had been invited as the keynote speaker to present the Fitness for All campaign, which had already gained national attention. Behind her, a screen displayed photos and videos of gym members from all walks of life, young and old, of all races, shapes, and abilities, sharing what fitness meant to them. "Inclusivity isn't just a buzzword," Renee said, her voice steady and confident. "It's a commitment. It's about breaking down barriers, challenging biases, and creating environments where everyone feels like they belong. That's what Fitness for All is about. And that's what we, as a company and as individuals, must strive for every day." The audience erupted into applause, and Renee felt a surge of pride. She had turned a moment of humiliation into a catalyst for change, proving that one voice could make a difference. The next time Renee walked into her gym, it felt different. Not because of any grand gestures or changes in decor, but because she knew the culture had shifted. Ethan was no longer the manager, but the new staff greeted her warmly, their smiles genuine. The atmosphere was welcoming, inclusive, and alive with a spirit of community. As Renee stepped onto the treadmill and began her workout, she glanced around the gym. She saw people of all backgrounds and abilities, working toward their goals, unencumbered by judgment or exclusion. It wasn't perfect, and for Renee, that was more than enough.